G'day there guys, Markee here, back again with an episode of r/Revenge. Now with that said, I want you to sit back, relax, enjoy the quality content, and don't try to anyone's throat in the process. I can't. Posted by user StormDancer10, titled, Handicapped parking is for handicapped people, not rich ones. First, just an FYI, in most handicapped parking spots, there's a place next to the parking spot marked off for loading and unloading wheelchairs. In the US, it's usually painted with diagonal stripes. On to the story. My son and I were at Walmart, and as I parked, I saw that a new BMW convertible owner decided that the striped spot was set aside for him. I looked, and there was no sign of a placard or handicapped tag. Ticked me off, and I stewed about it the whole time we were shopping. When he was still parked there when I came out, I decided to get spiteful. I found a piece of paper and left a note on his windshield. It said, "So sorry, I did not mean to scrape your car with my wheelchair. I would leave my contact info, but you were illegally parked, blocking my van. So good luck buffing that out." We sat in the car another 20 minutes and waited. Out came this guy that looked like a personal trainer. He came jogging up to his car, chatting on his phone. He saw the note, screamed, "Oh crap!" Then he spent the next 20 minutes going over his car inch by inch, rubbing every speck of dust or dirt. He was still looking when we left. Nothing harmed, no damage, just a lesson hopefully learned. Posted by user Burning Spear RTP, titled, "You want to steal my mail? I'll give you some mail to steal." This happened a few years back. I was going through a nasty divorce, custody fights, crazy legal bills, having my reputation dragged through the mud, etc. I'll spare you the usual details, but my wife was really into making my life hell for no reason other than not putting up with her abuse anymore. Anyway, I noticed my mail started disappearing. This was out of my own mailbox, and anything that still went to the old house showed up weeks late and already opened, if at all. I took my complaint to the postal inspectors, but they refused to take the case after hearing a divorce was involved, because they didn't want to get in the middle of a he said, she said thing. Thanks, guys. Sorry enforcing the law is such a chore. Anyway, I forwarded everything I could to my office and would occasionally send myself letters just to make an estimate of what the loss rate was. Some of the stuff was real and some was made up letters about trips I'd gone out, when I was in town, and other nonsense just to confuse her. I was angry and bored one night and decided I'd really give her something to really think about. I looked up the address of a law firm in my hometown and an offshore bank in the Bahamas. I cooked up a nice letterhead in Word and wrote myself a letter confirming that a 6-figure sum had been forwarded from my parents' estate to an offshore bank account, giving details. The next time I was in that town, I dropped it in the local post box. The letter disappeared, of course, and I kind of forgot about it. About a year later, when I was in court dealing with some other ridiculous bullcrap, her lawyer demands that the marital property be redivided as I had fraudulently covered up some major assets. I was floored that she'd gone to all this trouble. I figured she'd eventually catch on, but that it would majorly mess with her head and she would start doubting what of her spying was accurate and where I was gaslighting her. But no! She spends a ton of money on a lawyer to pursue this treasure trove of gold I'd buried on a tropical island. I denied it all, of course. She sent the lawyer to try to subpoena bank records and talk to the other lawyers, and so forth, and they came back to the courts all flustered when they couldn't prove anything. When I pointed out a couple of Easter eggs I'd hidden in the letter, such as that the bank account number was my mother's birthday, and that I'd mentioned a law firm named Dewey, Cheatham and Howe. Say it a couple times. Is it like Dewey, Cheatham and Howe? Do we cheat them and how? Ha! In the letter, they went ballistic and demanded the judge prosecute me for impersonating a lawyer, FYI, not actually a crime, and forgery on a nonsense letter I'd mailed to myself? I pointed out that while neither of those accusations would work, they in fact had submitted evidence of a crime, namely theft of US mail, which is a felony, and things got very quiet. The judge actually laughed in their faces and told them they had gotten made fools of and deserved it for stealing mail. That lawyer, her fourth for God's sake, quit soon after, and she's now toothless as she owed money to all of her different lawyers when word started to get around town. I can see it being a real thing. You might say it's fake. I think it's real, and I want to believe it. Posted by user Annie Phoenix, titled, "Where the frick are you from?" So this is a very, very petty revenge. To set the scene, I live in a small European country, and the older generations here can sometimes be incredibly xenophobic, which I really loathe. I am a linguist, and my husband is pretty into languages as well. We like to speak different languages together for fun and practice. So about 3 years ago, we were going home from an event, a theatre visit I think, which had us a bit dressed up. Think tux and a long dress. We were on the subway because parking in the downtown is hard, and at that time of the day, it was faster than a cab when I notice a total Karen with her husband sitting down right across from us. She immediately gave us a look, apparently disturbed by our attire. My husband kept on talking to me, and in a moment I hear the Karen go, "Can you see them? Showing off their money? Freaking Russians?" This made no bloody sense, like what? I nudge my hubby to pay attention to them. Her husband gives a sigh and reacts, "Honey, calm down, and I don't think they're speaking Russian." "Of course they are, listen." On cue, I switch language and hubby follows. We end up keeping the conversation alternating all the languages we can manage. Spanish, Italian, French, German, Japanese, some Serbian, and of course English. I can see the pair listening with raising frustration, quarreling about us the whole time. After about 3 more stops, we get up and get off the train. The Karen actually gets up and yells after us, "Where the frick are you from?" We smile and wave, and my husband shouts back in our native tongue, "Locals, have a nice evening." Posted by user Who Killed Samantha? I would like to know. Titled, "I let my brother wash his hair with Summer's Eve." For those who don't know, Summer's Eve is a soap for women's intimate parts. It's supposed to be gentler than real soap and aid in cleansing a little better than just water. My 20 female brother, 17, is one of the most spoiled and entitled boys I've ever met. He acts like the world owes him for his existence, and living with him is like constantly walking on eggshells. He always gets what he wants, and he always gets his way. He has all of his own things, and refuses to share, despite having no problem taking from the rest of us. This includes personal hygiene products. He is extremely wasteful, so he gets all of his own things. I share with the 2 youngest siblings, and sometimes guests. There have been times where he accused me of using his products and blew up. I swear you'd think I'd stolen money from the way he acts. I'll admit to using a shared shaving cream once or twice, but never anything else. After the way he blew up, I never touched the shaving cream again. Last summer, my boyfriend left his shaving cream here during a visit, and my brother finished it. He never asked for permission, and he knew it was my boyfriend's. He would get it out of my side of the cabinet and use so much of it each time he shaved. I was ticked, but my boyfriend didn't mind. I just started keeping his stuff in my room when he left things behind. After that, I left my shower items in my room. Recently, I figured that now he had 2 bottles of shampoo and body and face wash, he wouldn't touch mine. So I began leaving my things in the shower, including an expensive shampoo prescribed from my doctor for an ongoing skin condition. I'm only supposed to use it once a week, but I noticed it going pretty quickly. I brushed it off. Earlier, my brother and I were bickering, and he brought up the fact that I recently bought stuff for my mum and my boyfriend, some expensive-ish lotion, but none for him. I mentioned that I wasn't obligated to get him anything, especially when he never bothers getting anything for anyone else. He threw back, "That's why I only use your things." I decided to teach him a lesson or whatever, and I left my Summer's Eve bottle in the shower. I had taken off the label months prior because I didn't need my roommates knowing I was using this product. After he showered, he came and sat with my mum, dad, and I. I instantly recognized the smell, as it had a nice lavender scent, and he had quite obviously used a lot of it. I asked him what he used to wash his hair, and he says he used my shampoo with a cocky attitude, I explained to him that it was in fact a vagina soap. He flipped crap and called me stupid, among other things. But I wasn't fazed. At least he learned not to touch my stuff. My mum thought it was funny, but my dad is ticked that I let his poor boy wash his hair with that soap. He told me that I shouldn't be greedy with my other products, even though I am the one who paid for them in the first place. I'm not sorry. Posted by user J. Rossetti, titled, "My landlord was kind of a tramp, so I pay her rent at the latest possible time." So my landlord is kind of a tramp sometimes. I believe in being frank and honest with whoever I'm renting with so they can prepare and they know what's up. When COVID hit, I gave a heads up that we'd be fine for a few months due to savings, but it's possible we might run into some issues if the lockdown lasts too long. But no worries, we'd get caught up as soon as we could get going on our 3 businesses. She gave this big lecture about how if we can't pay, we need to move out, and she has lawyers for things like this and will send us a 1-month letter. I blew it off, after telling her that she really should speak to that lawyer, since she legally can't kick anyone out right now, and he would set her straight. 2 months later, I talked and said things are getting a bit tight, and we might run into trouble in a month or 2, but I'll make sure you at least have a month notice. A few days later, the local paper put out info that Illinois might pass a rent freeze and allow affected landlords and such to get paid out a pot so everyone was okay. This was great news. I shared her the link and she calls me on the phone to bark at me about how I just need to move out if I can't pay and she has bills to pay and worry about and she'll get a lawyer if she has to. I hung up on her mid-sentence. She called again, I ignored it. She texted me same ting she was tramping about. I told her she needs to stop making idle threats, that the only time she has problems with me is when she is rude and I tell her to pound sand, and that whether she likes it or not, she's still bound to the law. Well, lucky for her, they haven't wiped out late fees for late rent by law, but it is in contract that we can pay up until the 5th with no late fee. So now, instead of paying 2 or 3 days early, I have a monthly alarm set, and I send her funds at 10 minutes before the cutoff and take a screenshot. If they waive late fees and evictions at any point, I full-on intend to withhold and save her rent until the last legal day possible to avoid any penalties, and pay her then. Posted by user Angel Guide Indie, titled, "He ruined my sister's only birth experience, so I made sure he'd never forget her. Obligatory apology for formatting as I'm on mobile. Kinda my revenge, kinda my sister's, both of us really proud. This is going to be long, so TLDR at the bottom. Here's our cast. My sister, we'll call her Sarah for the story. Sister's ex-boyfriend Paul, ex-boyfriend's new wife Jane, ex-boyfriend's parents Mr. and Mrs. Doe, oldest brother Zeke, our parents, and me. When I was 14, and my oldest sister Sarah was 22, we found out that she was pregnant with Paul, her boyfriend of 4 years. They immediately got engaged and they were really happy. For a time, that is. Sarah had a horrible pregnancy. About 16 to 18 weeks in, the wonder of creating a human life evaporated within her. She developed hypermesis, which, if you don't know, is really bad morning sickness. She was constantly in pain. She developed gestational diabetes and just all around hated the experience. Around this time, Paul, the then fiancé, started getting sick of the complaining. I believe the argument was, well, your body is built to do this. It can't be that bad. Sarah was due around Valentine's Day, and Paul's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Doe, were very excited, both about the grandkid and the fact that he could be born on a holiday. She was very against that and really hoped that her son wouldn't be born on a holiday, even one as small as Valentine's Day. Her birthday sometimes falls on Easter and she hates it because it might make him feel that his day isn't very much about him. Well, Mrs. Doe says something like, well, if you want to name him Valentine or Valentino, then that'll make the day even more special to him. Again, Sister hated the idea. She thought it was tacky, he'd be bullied for it, and just really didn't like the name Valentino. Paul loved it, but agreed to go with a more average name like Daniel or Jared. Fast forward to February, and she was ready to get this over with. Sarah had officially been put on bed rest because while standing or walking, her blood pressure took unexpected spikes and dips. I looked back now and goodness do I feel bad for her. She was doing her best to avoid giving birth on Valentine's Day because, again, she didn't want him born on a holiday. Unfortunately, births happen when they happen, and the baby was going to come on Valentine's Day whether she wanted him to or not. I remember waiting out in the waiting room with my dad, brothers, and Paul, who couldn't stand to be in the delivery room because it was gross. I was so mad that he could have gone in, but wouldn't because he thought my sister was gross while giving birth, whereas I had to stay outside because I was too young to go in with my mum and other sister. Dad went home with the youngest two brothers, while the oldest, Zeke, stayed to watch me because I refused to leave. 16 hours after Sarah went into labor, my little nephew was officially part of the family on the evening of Valentine's Day. Unfortunately, Sarah was not okay. She had to have an emergency cesarean section, and while doing the operation, discovered that the back of her uterus, facing her spinal cord, had a very large and very severe, thankfully non-cancerous tumor. When I say large, I mean it was twice the size of a standard uterus. The doctors were shocked and didn't understand why nobody had noticed it on an ultrasound. It accounted for her severe back pain and blood pressure issues. The doctors immediately went in for more surgery to remove the tumor, but sadly ended up having to perform a full hysterectomy. This meant that my nephew would be Sarah's only child. Now, while Sarah was in for surgery, Paul was taking care of everything baby-related to make sure his son was okay. In my 14-year-old self's memory, I remember him being suitably distraught, but I didn't really pay him much mind and spent my time in the waiting room with my mother and other sister. Zeke, however, wanted to be a good future brother-in-law and make sure that Paul was okay. He found Paul filling out the baby paperwork on his own, looking, in my brother's words, like he had not a single worry in his mind. Zeke asked why Paul didn't wait for Sarah to fill out the paperwork as she would have been out for surgery within the hour, and Paul said that he just wanted her to rest and heal. That checked out with Zeke, as he was 16 and didn't know any better at the time. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. No, he wouldn't. He knows how much she hates that name, and still, she'd need to sign the paperwork too. My fellow peoples of Reddit, I regret to inform you that Paul forged Sarah's signature on the paperwork and waited until she was out of surgery to hand said paperwork over. My sweet nephew that was born on Valentine's Day was named Valentino on his first official birth certificate. I still to this day don't know why Paul and his family were so insistent about that name. He'd even picked out a different one with my sister. And before you ask, no, he was never brought up on forgery charges because his parents were witnesses to signing the papers, even though they only got there at the last minute. So, Sarah dumped him and got her son's name changed a month later. She was willing to do split custody with him because that's her son's father and she wants the kid to know him. But Paul vanished and she never heard anything back, which seemed weirdly out of character to us. Until a mutual and friend on Facebook was tagged in his wedding pictures 6 months later. Paul had apparently started cheating on her not long after she got pregnant. Sarah was livid, but there wasn't much she could do, so she filed for child support and continued to live her best life. Until 6 years later. This is where the revenge starts, my friends. So Sarah has been a single mother for the past 6 years and has been amazing at it. At this point in my career, I've been a hairdresser for about 8 months at our local Great Clips. I'm working one day and who is seated before me but Jane, Paul's wife, herself. I take her back for a trim and she clearly has no idea who I am. That adds up because a mutual friend that still keeps in contact with Paul said that Jane doesn't know a thing. She has no idea about Sarah, that she was the other woman, or that Paul actually has a kid and that he's been infrequently paying child support for. She's in the dark on it all. I told myself not to be an ass and treat her like a normal customer, which I did. Now at this point, Jane was heavily pregnant, so a lot of our conversation was about that. She loved being pregnant, but it was hard. Her husband was so unsympathetic, big sugar, and she was due in 10 weeks, and they still hadn't picked out a name for their baby girl. Ladies and gentle peoples, this was my chance. I asked her what kind of name she was looking for, and she said, I want something unique and unusual, but not ridiculous like Braid Lee Yay Yay Yay. You know the ones I'm talking about. Brilliant Lele. What kind of name is that? And Paul had suggested so many already, and she didn't like any of them. So, I, conniving little weasel I am, said, what about Sarah? My sister's name isn't actually Sarah. She was named after an older family member that passed not long after she was born, but there was no female equivalent for his name, so our parents created one. It's a beautiful name and just what Jane was looking for. She loved it, she stuck by it, and I found out by stalking her Facebook months later that she had put her foot down about it, and that was their daughter's name. Now Paul has a daughter with X's name to remind him every day about her, and also to remind him to pay his frickin' child support. Little nephew is 10 years old now with a new name and no contact with his biological father, though we do still call him Val as a family nickname. He likes it, but doesn't want to bring it to school, so it's staying a family nickname. Sarah pretends to hate when we call him that, in a joking way. As long as he likes it, she doesn't have a problem with it, and she's seeing a new guy who's really great and like a great father to Val. Posted by user Deadlock1989, titled, Good Luck Paying for the Car. So this isn't my story. It happened to a friend of a friend, so exact details are difficult to get, but this is what I was told. For ease of story and to hide identities, the names I will use are Jack and Jill. Bit of backstory. Jack and Jill had been going out for nearly 5 years by the point of this story. A year prior, Jill lost her job due to the company she worked for being liquidated. Money got tight for Jill, so Jack offered to help by covering her car payments, monthly installment, road tax, insurance, and fuel, so she could put the money she got to rent and utilities until she got a new job and was financially stable. Jack had a fairly decent job, so wasn't a strain on his income. A year goes by and Jill is still unemployed, but not through rejections. She got lazy and just spent all day doing nothing around her house while Jack was at work. One day, Jack gets work off early and decides to surprise Jill on the way back home, but as he is approaching her house, he sees another car in her driveway. He parks on the street and sneaks up to the house, and looks through the window to see Jill with another man. Jill was ticked, but he didn't burst in there, he walked away, got in his car and drove off. When Jack got home, he did a little digging and found out who the guy was through Facebook and found she had been having an affair for half a year with this guy. He was now really ticked off and wanted revenge, and he knew the best way to do it. This is where the revenge comes in. Jill loved her car, even though she barely used it. So what Jack did was stop all the payments that were going out of his bank account and put them onto her account. As the car was in her name, it was easy to do. As the payments had only just gone out, he had to wait for the end of the month for his revenge to unfold. The end of the month comes, and Jill's bank card is declined at the shops. She calls the bank up to find out what is going on, and they tell her she has gone overdrawn because of the car payments going out of her account. Jill phoned Jack and asked why the payment is coming out of her accounts and not his. Jack coldly replied, "'Cause I know you cheated on me, and I'm not going to pay for my ex-girlfriend's car," and hung up. Fallout of the revenge. She tried to get Jack to pay for the car, even got lawsuits involved, but as she was the sole owner of the car, it was declared he had not legal responsibility to pay for her car. As she couldn't afford her road tax or insurance, she couldn't drive the car, and eventually she got so far behind in the payments that the car was repossessed. To pay the debt, she had to get a minimum wage job, and now takes the bus to and from work. G'day there guys, Outro Markee here. Hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I enjoyed making it today. If you did, be sure to like, comment and subscribe. Tell me what you thought about it down below. Also, if you like memes, be sure to head on over to my second channel, Markee 2. It should be one of the sexy Australian faces on screen, the one without the flag. It's my latest and greatest creation, and I hope you like it. Also, I'd like to give a huge shout out to my channel members and Patreon subscribers. You guys do so much good for me, and the support goes without saying, but I'm gonna say it anyway. I love you guys, and I appreciate all the help and support you provide me on this channel. Also, if you want to join the family, links are down in the description below, or click that join button next to the subscribe button. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed that one today. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.